Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be giving you my Virgo 2022 horoscope forecast. Now, yes, it does apply and pertain to the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Now, anyway, first thing up is, I'm going to talk about the transit of Jupiter and how that could affect Virgo at this time during this year, and Jupiter is going to be in Pisces and Aries in 2022. Now, during the time it's in Pisces, now the seventh house is what will be emphasized and highlighted for Virgo. This could be very fortuitous for our relationships at this time. It may be ones that might be connected with the metaphysical, which can include astrology. If you're somebody, Virgo, if you are into astrology, this might be might be a fortunate period for like a partnership with somebody as well. Or, could be something where it could also, the transit may enlarge, it could be, Pisces related competition. The seventh house is also connected with competition. It could be something with dancing or poetry or photography as some examples. It can also be where it may enlarge idealism in relationships, and you might also find the truth that remember, Jupiter is about truth and veracity. So it might be a time where you find out the truth about people in relationships that might be deceptive or duplicitous, and it might also enlarge forgiveness in open enemies, open adversaries at this time, and which really could be which could be really very auspicious. I mean, it might not be something that gives you any abundance of wealth or prosperity, but it's something which is something that more of us, need to do. I have trouble even, you know, doing so. There's still things that I lament about over enemies from the past that I can't, I've been unable to get over, sadly. But anyway, now also too, Jupiter will be in Aries for part of the 2022. Now, during that time, the eighth house is what will be emphasized and highlighted for Virgo. Now, at this time, that could be fortuitous for a shared resources situation, in which you have much, being in Aries, perhaps much drive and energy for, or it could be aggressively pursuing somebody that could be an intimate someone for an intimate relationship. It might be something too where it can also be very good, could be very auspicious for showing. It could be bravery and courage, which is Aries, in crisis situations. It might lead to something very positive for yourself, or even very fortuitous for taking the lead in an intimate relationship at this time. I mean, eighth house is about shared resources as well. So, I mean, maybe there's something for some of you that might be, might have a business connection with something with welding or carpentry, anything that could be Aries related, and maybe speech pathology, can throw that out there. It's something that could be possible at this time. But remember that Jupiter, as I've stated in previous videos, is very paradoxical. It's very strongly benign and benevolent, but it could also have the tendency to enlarge and expand. It might enlarge and expand contentious situations with a sexual partner or someone you're in a shared resources situation with. It could also perhaps enlarge, let's say, well, it could enlarge surgery. The eighth house is surgery. Jupiter can enlarge. Aries is connected with the head, the face, and the skull, and the brain as well. So it could be something that might be associated with something surgical with one of those parts that are associated uh, with Aries. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, as far as Saturn goes, and how it may, the transit of Saturn during 2022, and how it might impact Aries. Now, Saturn is going to be in Aquarius for the duration for all of 2022. So for um, Virgo, the sixth house is what's going to be emphasized and highlighted. So for Virgo, at this time, you may be dealing, Saturn is connected with chronic illnesses. The sixth house is associated with health. You might have to deal with something associated, a physical related issue connected with the ankles, the shins, the calves, the lower legs, or the nerves at this time. You might also find yourself being, showing more responsibility, flavored with selflessness and altruism toward an aunt or an uncle at this time as well. The sixth house is associated with an aunt or an uncle. And it can be, or both, perhaps. It could. You might wind up helping both in that regard. It's connected with an aunt and an uncle, and it can be a time too where you might find yourself, really working hard, maybe to follow through on maybe a diet that may be somewhat unorthodox at this time. You may, since Saturn is about laborious work and the sixth house is connected with employment, you might find yourself as well dealing some kind of work that is Aquarius related. It can be something associated, could be connected with astrology, astronomy, computers, the internet, altruism, meteorology, aviation, innovation as some examples. You may also be dealing with some physical related matter that could be connected with Saturn, such as something with the knees, the bones, the joints, the hamstrings. The fact it's in Aquarius may be something that might be very erratic and sporadic, might be intermittent, may come and go at this time as well. And you might be experiencing some limitations and restrictions as well in your employment at this time. The sixth house is also associated with pets, so there may be more responsibilities toward a pet at this time. You might feel that it's causing it's more of an effort, more of a strain taking care of a pet at this time. And the sixth house is also associated with service. So this transit may manifest in service you're providing for somebody with very altruistically, selflessly, or it could be something Aquarius related, such as an astrological or computer service at this time. You could be installing like alarms and electronic computerized alarms or what have you for somebody, as some examples. And this is anyway. Now, as far as Uranus goes, well, Uranus is going to be in Taurus during the whole 2022 time period. So for Virgo, the ninth house is what's going to be emphasized and highlighted. So this can manifest in a number of ways. Virgo, you might find yourself, being maybe having some unusual, unorthodox philosophy at this time. You might find yourself as well perhaps taking very spontaneous or very, it could be an unanticipated long distance journey as another example of how this transit may manifest. It may be a time too, as far as higher education goes. You may be taking a higher education course that could be associated with Uranus, such as something with astronomy or astrology or computers, electronics, aviation as some examples. And also too, financial fluctuations. Uranus and Taurus, Uranus can be erratic energy, it can be about fluctuation. Taurus, of course, is associated with money. It might be, if you're dealing with any financial fluctuations or an erratic or sporadic monetary situation, it may impact long-distance travel plans at this time. It can be something with higher education, maybe matters with in-laws or grandchildren as well might have an impact on it. can also be an unanticipated, monetary, something that you receive, some money you receive unexpectedly. Might be for better. A lot of this is predicated and dependent on the aspects it makes to points in your chart. If this makes, say, a sextile or trine to your natal Jupiter at some point, it might be very auspicious for an unanticipated, lump sum somewhere from somebody that might actually be beneficial to ninth house matters. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, could also be, keep in mind the ninth house is associated with the law, so it could be something unanticipated or unexpected. Something spontaneously happens with the law. It could be a suit that may be filed against you, or something that you had felt like you needed to do on the spur of the moment, kind of off the cuff, and filing some situation, filing a lawsuit perhaps against somebody, or some legal issue that just seems to happen like out of the blue, basically, that you might have to contend with or deal with. So those are some ways, the way that particular, as far as Uranus, Uranus and Taurus, emphasizing the ninth house and highlighting the ninth house at this point in time for Virgo. Now, some of you, have, like, say, a late Virgo rising. May have, this transit of Uranus may be in the eighth house for some of this time, or at least some of the time, during 2022. So if that is something that transpires for you, you might wind up one way that could manifest. It could be some kind of eighth house of surgery. It might be on something Uranus related, something connected with the ankles, the shins, the calves, the nerves. Something with certain might involve your circulation at this time, or can be. Uranus is also connected with unusual, growths and protrusions, and Taurus is associated with the neck and the throat. So there might be something there in some cases, that might take place where surgery might be required, or there's strong trauma associated with it. The eighth house is also trauma as well. It might be something where perhaps Uranus is also connected with goals and aspirations. So you might find where goals and aspirations may be connected with something eighth house related, such as something with insurance, taxes, astrology, something with a death profession, such as working as a coroner or mortician. And the fact that it's in Taurus, maybe it's done with a lot of persistence and loyalty, and it's something where maybe money is more involved in the decision than a lot of other instances. Now, anyway, next thing I'm going to get to is Neptune. Well, Neptune, of course, is going to be in Pisces for the entirety of 2022. So for Virgo, this can manifest in a number of ways. I mean, I have Neptune in the 7th house natally, and when you have, this transit, it can be something where it might be very difficult deciphering the motives and intentions of other people at this time. You got to be very careful who you're dealing with. Even open enemies, open adversaries may be nebulous or unclear. They may be people that are actually enemies, but you are not even seeing them as such at this time. There's a tendency, Neptune has a tendency to gloss over details. It makes things very nebulous or unclear. Be very careful and prudent at this time, Virgo, over contracts at this time. Make sure you're seeing the fine print in things. And it can be something too, is that the thing about this as well, on a positive end, you might express a lot of idealism in your relationships, even with a grandparent. Could be a significant other, it could be a marriage partner at this time, and showing a lot of forgiveness toward your enemies, toward your open enemies at this point in time. And Neptune, can be about can be associated with mediums and Pisces is deception. So you don't want to get involved in a connection with somebody like that at this time. If you're trying to form, like, say, a business, seventh house is about partnerships. Make sure you're dealing with people that are on the up and up. If you're somebody that is like a medium or a psychic, and you're going into business with somebody, or even an astrologer, make sure they are who they claim to be, and it's not somebody that's like a fallacious astrologer or fallacious medium at this time. And in some cases, this could be about the dissolving and dissipation of relationships. And it's not always bad, because they could be people that might have been to your detriment. Again, I do have this placement natally, and it's really, I mean, that's been my life basically. That I've had relationships constantly, important friendships gradually dissolve and dissipate. I also have Scorpio on the cusp of the seventh house, which certainly doesn't help. It's at 22 degrees, a critical degree in astrology, of course. And that's certainly, Scorpio is a sign of death and obliteration, so you could pretty much do the math on that one. And the thing is, anyway, yeah, and it's just something that you really need to be careful of during this time as far as Neptune goes. But it could also be a time too where you may be involved in, it could be Neptune form of competition. It can be something with dancing or poetry or photography. I don't know, chemistry. There's actually a competition for that poetry, as some examples at this time. But it's just something to really and be careful too. You might have more propensity to attract people that are involved in drugs or alcohol at this time as well during life. You might find yourself sacrificing for many but not getting a lot in return, and that's not really, it's not what life's really about. Anyway, life is, most of us will accept and understand that life is really about giving. It's paramount. Receiving is secondary, and it's important to remember that during this time. And anyway, the thing about this as well is it can be also what I want to get at now is, sorry, I'm going to get to Pluto. Pluto is going to be in Capricorn for the entire time of 2022. So for Virgo, the fifth house is what's going to be emphasized and highlighted. And this could manifest a number of ways. Sadly, it could, in some isolated cases, it could be about the death of a child. I have Pluto in my fifth house natally, actually. And I have never had any children. It's intercepted as well, so it makes the matter a little bit more taxing for me, you could say. But anyway, it could also be, it could be the death of a lover, a romantic partner, maybe somebody that was prominent in a hobby you're involved with, or it could be creative endeavor. It could also be, the fifth house is about our hobbies, our amusement, our enjoyment. So you might take up something Plutonian as some form of enjoyment. It could be something with the occult, which includes astrology or recycling, or something that might involve transformation, whether it could be sculpting or what have you. Something, again, something associated with transformation, or it can also be, too, at this time, that you had to guard against, if you have any children, expecting infallibility or perfection from them, because Pluto is about perfection, infallibility. This is where we want, we want things to be perfect at this time. Maybe it's good I don't have any children, because again, I do have this placement daily. Maybe I would be expecting too much from them. And being in, critical, judgmental Virgo, there's no telling how I may act toward them. As far as be expecting perfection. Virgo wants perfection, and I know it's generational, Pluto and Virgo, but still I believe that the sign that it's in can have some impact and influence on the person's chart and how they act. But anyway, another thing too is that Pluto is also about support, whether it's moral, emotional, or monetary. So being in the fifth house, it can be a time where it could be positive for receiving moral, emotional, monetary support from lovers, from children at this time. And guard against being overly obsessed or fixated on fifth house related matters, whether it's children, whether it's lovers, even it could even be matters of a speculative nature, investments, or even gambling in some cases, especially if you're not doing this legally. You don't need to be doing that anyway if it's illegal. If you're doing it in a legal manner, you might still wind up being, almost, it could manifest in compulsive gambling, depending on, the aspects that this makes. If you make a lot of adverse aspects, it could indicate that. Is how it's expressed, how it manifests for Virgo at this point in time. So, those are some ways that this could, as far as that goes, that this could, how it could pan out, as far as, Pluto and being in Capricorn and the fifth house being emphasized and highlighted for Virgo, at this time. And it might be a time too where you might be involved in Plutonian investments. The fifth house is about investments, and you can be, maybe there is something connected with plutonium or something nuclear that has, that's could be something that could be invested, and you may want to confer that on the internet and find out about, confirm that. But if there is, that could be, as an example, or anyway, or something with a recycling firm or company as another example. And it's just really about this time too. Pluto is also connected with passion and desire. So you might be expressing a lot more passion and desire in your love life at this time, more so than usual, Virgo. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.